Hi everyone, team, with another review today. So it's Halloween and I'm sick, so I couldn't really work something very cool, but I tried to do something different for this occasion. So enjoy this little edit of a witch artwork while I read you a creepypasta. I'm going to leave the link down below for the creepypasta because if you don't understand any of my words because I'm sick, you can read it down below. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little spooky tale, and I will see you in the next video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below, and wish me well, because I'm really sick, and I don't know if it isn't COVID, so good. I'm going to see you in the next one. Goodbye.
When I was 7 years old, my mother and I moved to a small town in Massachusetts. It was a rough time for me as my father had just up and left a few weeks before. My mom told me that he had taken a bad job somewhere. She told me that he still loved me and cared about me, but even at such a young age, I understood that he had up and left. It was Halloween week, and I started at my new school on the 25th of October. As a stubborn 7-year-old, I insisted on walking there by myself. My mother frowned, thought it would over, and agreed with one caveat. Alright, as long as we walk the path together every night before school, and you promise to stay on the trail. She had bought a small 2-bedroom cottage less than a mile from my school, so it wouldn't be far. It was a nice little place, but I guess with my father gone, nothing could really feel like home. The evening before I began school, the two of us walked into the forest behind our house. Although the sun was started to set, the path was clearly lit. What a perfect way to school. Can you believe this house was still available? She said. I nodded, but said nothing. We used to have family here, you know. I really like this place, my mom said, smiling. The next morning, I made my way into the kitchen and was greeted with a warm smile and pancakes. As I sat down to eat, my mother must have noticed that I looked nervous and sat down next to me. Don't worry, you'll make friends here. I have a good feeling, she said. Looking back, I can't really understand how after her husband left her, she could be so strong. I just hope that I have some of her strength. I made my way down the path just as we had practiced every night. When I arrived at the school, a tall teacher with thick glasses greeted me at the door and helped me into the classroom. I sat down among 10 other students, and the teacher began to speak about what the year was going to be like and what we would learn. No one was mean to me or anything, but no one really spoke to me. All the kids were so busy talking about their costumes for Halloween that they barely even noticed a new kid was there. There was this one little girl, though, that said hello. She sat 2 rows back from the other children, and I figured that maybe she was new to the school as well. She was very pretty, with brown hair and glasses, and as I glanced back, she caught my gaze and gave me a big smile. I tried to smile back, but she was so pretty that it was so hard not to be shy. Turning back around, I tried to listen to the teacher, but I was really just thinking about her. School ended for the day at 3 p.m. I grabbed my bag and rushed outside towards the path to my house, very anxious to run home and tell my mom about the pretty girl that I had smiled at me. Hurrying home down the path, I suddenly tripped over and fell hard, scraping my knee. Sitting up to examine my injury, I looked back to see what had made me stumble. I saw the biggest crow I had ever seen. Strange too. What was wrong with its eyes? As I made my way closer to examine it, I heard someone behind me. Hello? I know you from school, she said. Surprised, I looked up quickly to see the pretty girl from class. Wondering if she had seen me fall, I was embarrassed and got to my feet quickly. My knee hurt pretty badly, but I was more worried about how I looked to her. Yeah? I think I saw you today in class. My name is Jimmy, I said. Smiling back, she replied, I'm Margaret. We walked together down the trail. How's your leg? She asked. Oh, it's okay, I said, trying to act tough. You live down here too, huh? She told me that her family had lived in this town for some time and that she also had a path behind her home leading through the forest to the school. We were instantly friends. As we got to my house, she surprised me by asking, can I see what your house looks like? You made it sound so nice. I quickly smiled and knocked on my front door. My mom answered, very surprised to see Margaret next to me. Smiling, she said, well, you don't waste time making friends, do you, Jim? Are you going to introduce the young lady or just stand there? My face turned red as I muttered out, oh, this is Margaret. She lives around here and we met at school today. Trying not to show my excitement, I acted cool. She wanted to come over. I said, hello, ma'am. I wanted to see your house. My family lives here too. Margaret smiled and said, come on in, dear. I have just finished a batch of cookies, my mom replied. As the three of us sat around the kitchen table talking, we got on the subject of Halloween. Why are you going as, Margaret? My mom asked. I'm going to be a witch this year. I heard they are scary, Margaret said. Witches aren't scary, I quickly stated. Smiling again, Margaret corrected herself. Well, I was going to go as a witch, but my family's out of town this weekend, and I don't really have a place to stay yet. It's a business trip, and they said I'm too young to go with them. They asked my regular babysitter, but she got sick yesterday, and now my mom interrupted her. Well, if it's alright with your parents, you would be more than welcome to stay here over the weekend and go trick-or-treating with us. It was at that moment I realized that I literally had the best mom in the world. What do you think, Jim? My mom asked, holding back a smile. Yeah, that's a great idea, I said. My mom drove Margaret home to meet her parents and asked them permission for her to stay at our home over the weekend. When my mom got back, I asked her how it had went. It went great, my mom said. I think her mother and aunt take care of her. They live in a beautiful little cottage on the trail. They invited me in and we talked for quite a while. Both of them thought it was a great idea. I do have one question though. You have a crush on this girl, correct? Pretending I didn't hear her, I quickly ran over to my room and closed the door. Got homework, love you, I said, a little embarrassed. That night, I tried to sleep, but I was too excited for Halloween. It was just a few days off and I had already made a friend. This weekend was going to be great. Thinking about how this might really be a new start, I began to notice something in the corner of my room. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then slowly my eyes began to focus. There was a tall man with long dark hair and a gray beard. His eyes were piercing and focused. They started unblinking out the window. My body started to tremble in fear. I hid under the blankets, pretending it wasn't real and praying he hadn't seen me. Looking out from under, I almost screamed out in terror. He was just floating there, holding a huge axe with what looked like blood on it. I wanted to scream and run out of the room, but I was frozen. I couldn't make a sound. I don't know how I fell asleep, but when I woke up the next day, he was gone. And it was like it never happened. I wanted to tell my mom, but I just couldn't for some reason. I don't know. The week went by quickly, except for every single night the man in my room would return, always holding a large axe in his hand. Some nights he would just peer out the window, and other nights he would pace back and forward. I could see his mouth move, but no words came out. I watched him in fear and the axe. The night before Halloween, he finally turned his head and looked directly at me. He locked eyes with mine and he took a step forward. I pulled the blankets over my head and started to shake in fear. Was this real? Was I going crazy? Halloween day came and I almost told Margaret about the man in my house. I felt guilty for not telling her, but I was afraid she would think I was crazy or something. And looking forward to this weekend was the only thing I had been happy about in some time. Margaret and I went house to house that night and I tried to have a good time, but wondered what was going to happen tonight. When she stayed at my house, would the man come again? Would he see her? She asked me what was wrong, and I pretended it was nothing. As we got back to my house, my mom had prepared a sleeping space for us in the living room. Margaret was going to sleep on the couch, and I had a blanket spread out on the floor. We compared candy, both agreeing we were tired. My mom was sleeping in the next room and told us to wake her if we needed anything. That night, as Margaret and I went to sleep, the wind started to howl against the window. I told myself that I had never seen this man outside of my room, and I thought we would be safe here. I felt guilty, but it was just so nice having a friend with me at night. I couldn't face him again alone. The storm became louder and louder as the clock struck midnight. Staring at the ceiling, I was starting to become more tired when I heard Margaret ask, "Jimmy, are you awake?" "I'm up," I said. "I can't sleep. It's freezing. Do you have another blanket?" she asked. I told her I had one in my room, then froze. Realizing what I had just said, I would have to go back into my room. Searching for any other option, I knocked on my mother's door, but she didn't really reply. The storm was so loud that even knocking didn't wake her. I thought about yelling her name, but realized how childish that would make me look to Margaret. "Didn't you say you had a blanket in your room?" she asked again. I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I'll get it for you." Opening the door slowly, I saw no sign of any ghost or monster or man. I held my breath and quickly ran over to the far closet to find the extra blanket. Fumbling through my clothes, I paused as I heard the door close behind me. The wind now almost shook the house, and it took every ounce of my courage to turn around. There was no ghost though, it was just Margaret. "Oh, it's just you," I said. Margaret smiled and replied, "Who were you expecting, the boogeyman?" It was then I noticed that something was off about her. As she locked the door behind her, I realized she was taller than before, much taller. With the door closed, it was very dark in my room, but were her eyes red? I thought I could see two small red dots looking back from her. She laughed and softly said, "You shouldn't have let me in, Jimmy." "Margaret, this isn't funny," I stammered. "I find it very funny," she said. As she made her way across the room, I saw a large knife in her hand. The moon shone across her face, and what was once a beautiful young girl was now an old, haggard-looking woman with a hideous smile on her face. "Want a hug, Jimmy?" she said. I backed into the corner of my room and screamed out for my mother. "She can't hear you, Jimmy. She's never going to hear you," Margaret said. Having nowhere to go, I watched her get closer and closer. I was so scared now that I couldn't even move. All I could do was watch as she lifted the knife over her head and smiled wickedly. What happened next I will remember for the rest of my life. Before she could bring the knife down, something caught her gaze. She looked over towards the window and sunk back in fear. She screamed out and fell onto the floor, trying desperately to run, but he stopped her. Holding onto her with one hand, the tall man brought down the axe on her neck. She screamed in agony and fear, her neck now half off as she still tried to crawl away. Placing his foot down roughly on her back, he pinned her to the floor. He then brought the axe down hard again with both hands, severing her neck almost entirely. There was a strong pull, and then a grisly ripping sound. I heard a horrible pop as the man pulled her head completely off her body. All I could do was watch as he opened the window and carried her body and head out into this forest. Stunned, I looked out. I could barely see, yet I just stood there and watched until he disappeared completely. I tried waking my mother, but she couldn't seem to hear as I shouted her name. After I checked to see that she was safe, I went back into my room and just stood at the window. I think I was in some kind of shock. After a while, I heard her door open. Running over to her, I hugged her close. "Good morning. Did you two have fun last night?" she asked, seemingly having heard nothing. "Tell Margaret that breakfast will be ready until it shakes." "Is she still asleep on the couch?" my mom asked. I replied, mumbling something about her mom already having picked her up. Then my mom went into the kitchen to start breakfast. I wondered what I would say if her parents did actually show up to collect her. In the unlikely event that her parents were human, they would probably be thankful she was gone. That year was the start of a new chapter of my life. I now knew that demons, witches, ghosts, evil things weren't just fairy tales, they were real. I'm old now and I have a family of my own. My son was born a few months back and I have never spoken a word of any of this to my wife. I've never found the right moment to tell her. One last thing. A few days after Halloween as a child, my mom had taken out a photo album and sat down next to me. I watched as she casually thumbed through the photos and then I stopped her. "Who's that, Mom?" "Who's that, man?" I asked. That's your great-grandfather," she replied. I stared at the photo. It was him. I slept better after that. I would still see him from time to time staring out my window into the darkness. Margaret wasn't the last evil thing I would come across, and I now worry about the safety of my newborn son. It's Halloween night as I stand over my son's crib and stare out into the shadows of the forest beyond me. I can feel something coming for us, but did they know one thing? We aren't alone.